Hey everybody, my name is Michael Moe and I'm founder of GSV. Welcome to GSVtv. We have an incredible panel this morning, the title of which is the Exponential Enterprise, AI in the Flourishing Workforce. With us, we've got some truly outstanding panelists joining me. We've got Omar Abbosh, the CEO of Pearson. We have Scott Pulsipher, the president of Western Governors University. Claire Zhao, partner and AI lead at GSV Ventures. We have Mike Clementi, who is the global chief human resource officer at ChangeBridge People Solutions. And we have Taylor Stockton, the chief innovation officer for the Department of Labor. So welcome to GSVtv, welcome panelists.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So the title of this talk, this panel, is the Exponential Enterprise. And with AI, one of the questions is it really the existential enterprise? Meaning, is it going away, or certainly going the way that we've known it? Throughout history, disruptive technology has been forecast by the doomsayers that it was going to destroy jobs, eliminate work, and so forth. Yet every time when they're talking about the Industrial Revolution or automobiles or the internet or PCs, it's actually had an exponential impact in terms of job growth. But some of the experts, many of the experts, are saying this time is different. What do you think? Is this going to basically eliminate jobs? Is this going to be an opportunity to see an explosion of innovation? Maybe I'll turn it over to Taylor Stockton with the Department of Labor just to give the kind of the official view from the U.S. government.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Appreciate the conversation and everyone joining. I think when we look at the AI revolution, it certainly is different in many ways. We believe at the Department of Labor that it will be more impactful, more transformative than any past waves of technology. But we would also still push back on many of the doomsayers that are out there that will be a net negative for workers and for jobs. I think a lot of what we're doing is tracking a lot of the new exciting jobs that are being created. I think our team in particular is excited that a lot of these new jobs being created might be accessible without a 4-year degree. And so a lot that we are doing to make sure that there are pathways to the new jobs that are there. I think the one other quick thing I would just say on the doomsayer narrative, which we certainly hear a lot about, is I think part of why some of that is overstated is because a lot of the individuals who are making some of these perhaps more sensationalist predictions are really looking at the technology itself, right? They're looking at the capabilities of the technology, which they are certainly right. The capabilities of technology are accelerating massively. But I think the thing that we like to remind people of is just because AI can do something technically doesn't mean it will, right? The actual bottleneck is often customer preferences, regulations, organizational adoption. And so that's a lot of the reason why we feel that some of that displacement narrative is overstated. And really there's a lot of opportunity here for workers in the future economy.
Omar, do you agree with that, or what's your take?
Here's how I think about it. I think at one level, and exactly as Taylor said, the rate at which the AI technology skills themselves are progressing is so unbelievable that it strikes you like this is a once in at least many lifetimes opportunity for humans to advance, to progress, to design new science, to design new molecules, to fundamentally rethink so much of how society and business operates. It's an enormous opportunity. And on the other hand, a lot of the fear comes from the pace of change, which of course impacts people in terms of when the technology skills are advancing much faster than human skills, that's worrying. And perhaps when the rate of change is so quick, the question of can our institutions keep up? So institutions like our formal educational institutions, our enterprises, can we manage that? Now, personally, I like to focus on what is knowable and what we can control. And so firstly, in the world of education, there's tons of things that we know we should and can be doing that will make a difference. Like teaching kids AI would be very good for jobs. Like this idea that you don't teach them in formal education and then they arrive at jobs and people say what AI do you know? It's like a crazy, ridiculous disconnect. And there are some competitive countries, to the US, for example, where it's the opposite approach. They're shoving AI into education at pace. And so we need to do the same. teaching people how to learn. Like the one skill that you know for sure you need in the future is being good at learning. Like learning is the skill. So when the half-life of skills are declining, let's like leverage the learning science and bake it into how we teach people to learn. There's a ton of things that educators already know about that, and that we can bring that to the fore. And then on the enterprise side, this recognition of that skills will become a more and more important way of thinking about who you promote, who you progress, who you hire, how you develop people, and having a much more practical way of assessing truly verified skills of people so that you can help them progress in their lives and careers. And so there's a bunch of things that we know will work and that we can do now. And I think we should just get on with it.
So Scott, Western Governors University, you've been working with students, a lot of them being working adults for decades now. And what are you seeing in terms of the shift, in terms of just what students are interested, what employers are looking for, and this idea of what the future means for the enterprise? Is this going to be a boom for employment, or do you think it's going to really radically reduce the number of jobs, high-paying jobs?
Well, I don't know about the paying of the jobs and that part of it, but I do know that the expectations that employers have for the AI fluency of the recent graduates or the recent credential attainment, like there is an expectation is that you're coming into that role with a greater degree of technology fluency and now AI fluency that didn't exist before. But it is also changing the nature of the skills required in the respective jobs, and that's not that is true across all the different domains that WGU participates in, whether it's in the technology field or in the world of health and teaching. I will say that for WGU's perspective, we certainly are having to utilize AI as an enabler to increase our pace of being able to sense or identify what are those skills that are shifting in the marketplace so that we can actually integrate those back into our curriculum design, the content that's developed, the assessments, et cetera. And it's enabling that at a level that we weren't able to previously do. A simple example would be, when you had 5 to 10 subject matter experts in a particular field of study for a program that we're developing, you now can actually access 10 times that number, 100, 200 different subject matter experts. By synthesizing their inputs, utilizing AI, you can really get to a skills graph that allows you to focus on those core skills that are needed as learning outcomes. And that accelerates our pace of that development today. Now, what I do believe is that we haven't yet seen the acceleration, meaning in terms of the job changes themselves yet. Nurses are still nurses, that hasn't dramatically changed. Cybersecurity is still cybersecurity, teaching still teaching. But in all of those domains, you start to see emerge these particular skills related to technology or AI fluency and how it's changing the nature of that job, even if we don't know all the skills that are going to be required in 5 years from now. I'm a little bit with Omar on this, by the way. It's like ridiculously hard to predict what the total effects of AI will be. So let's just kind of get on with it. Let's just start utilizing the technology and see where it takes us rather than trying to predict where we think it's going to take us.
So Mike Clementi, what say you?
Yeah, if you just, what a good conversation. If I just reflect on the last 24 months and, in my role working as CHRO and, enterprise companies like Unilever, but now in my human capital practice, we're out with a lot of people. 18 to 24 months ago, the group was quite mixed. There were people who believed deeply it was going to change a lot, and there were people who were quite skeptical. I think it's whatever the percentage or where they're flipped. Most people know it's coming and it's going to be profound. So what I would say is kind of 2 or 3 thoughts to keep the conversation flowing. One is I'm bullish that it's going to change jobs for the better and get rid of a lot of rote tasks that frankly people don't like. So I'll come at it from the human perspective. We know that engagements come down. We know that joy has come down in roles, and it's because a lot of the rote tasks are not enjoyable. If we can shift those to getting them done easier, faster, better, and create more purpose in jobs, I think we're going to be better off. I'm not sure what the net impact will be, but we do know that some jobs will go away. I think most of us would agree. Other jobs will be created, and all jobs will change. And so if you just sit with that principle for a moment and say, we probably can agree with that. All jobs will change. Some jobs will go. More jobs will be created. I'd like to come at it from a behavioral perspective, Michael, which is we're left with kind of three choices. Maybe there's more as let's say humans, but employees, which is I can hide, I could ride, or I could drive. And I would encourage us to at least ride, if not drive. And so from a behavior perspective, it's about leaning in, I think, and really trying to be participative in the change that's coming, because we can agree that all jobs will change. That's sort of the way that we're looking at it. I think most of our clients are looking at it that way. We see big businesses thinking about how do we get on the change wagon and do that better.
So Claire, you're in the, intimate in terms of a lot of the new technologies that are being introduced or what's coming down the line. How do you see this playing out?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I always go back to that quote that we tend to overestimate the power of technology and its capabilities in the short term, and we underestimate in the future. Pretty recently, you had the chairman of OpenAI's board, Brett Taylor, and former co-CEO of Salesforce, saying that he actually believes we're in an AI bubble. But directionally, if you look at the internet bubble too, everything that people laid out in the 1990s came true, even if you did have the flops like Webvan and Pets.com. So I think for me, applying that same mindset to this, do I believe that overnight in the next 5 years, suddenly all entry-level roles and white-collar jobs are going away? I don't think that will play out for all the reasons that the other panelists on here mentioned, that so much of this is only one part tech, and then the other 9 parts are change management and people and culture and inertia. However, I do think directionally what we are seeing is a unprecedented technology that I think what I would call out is different this time, is that this technology, one, replaces cognitive labor. So before, if you thought of the Industrial Revolution, that obviously mechanized physical labor, but for the first time ever, we have these units of intelligence that we're able to produce. And I think that's why you're seeing such a heavy emphasis on sovereign AI. That's why you're seeing Meta build these 3 gigawatt Manhattan-sized data centers. The drive behind that, I do think, is driven by this desire to essentially, you can factory farm intelligence. So I do think that is coming, and I think we have to be honest about that. The other thing I think I would emphasize is just that this is the first technology ever that self-improves. We have never had a technology that is able to iteratively improve itself. And so I think directionally we are heading to a place where agents, as a bunch of us mentioned, will start replacing many functions of work. And I think in 10, 20 years, humans will adapt. I believe in the adversity of humanity. But what I do worry about is this next 2 to 5 year period where there is a fundamental mismatch in the geometry of labor that is needed by the workforce and what is coming out, especially in the entry-level pipeline. I think there are a lot of people who are going to be very, I think there's going to be a lot of anger about what has been sold to them about going to certain institutions and getting a degree and getting a job after that, while we kind of recalibrate this mismatch.
So you mentioned sort of how things take longer than typically a lot of the enthusiasts think. I always say it's being too early is the same as being wrong. And so you look at some of these monster businesses today where we saw the predecessor that people disappeared because they were too early. But you look at this mismatch that's already taking place, lifetime in the marketplace. You see unemployment for graduates that have engineering degrees being double that of an art history major right now, because what used to be an entry-level job all of a sudden has been instantly, it seems, replaced by technology. How do we think about, and mentioned about this kind of, Omar said, the lifelong learning aspect, we're going to continuously be learning. How do we think about creating the modern workforce? I mean, what are the skills, what is the knowledge that people need to thrive in a world where we don't really know what 10 years from now the key career is going to be? How do we think about that? Maybe I'll start with Scott, because Scott, you kind of talked about a little bit of this, but what does that skill set look like? What is the academic institution looking to do, and how's the enterprise working with academic institutions to make sure that that the labor force that's available is going to be prepared? If not prepared, what's the pathway to get them prepared?
Yeah, I mean, I suspect that one of the things I was going to pivot off of what Claire actually highlighted is that whether we actually believe it or not, I think generally one would argue, at least I would argue, is that most of post-secondary education was actually trying to design around what we would consider to be enduring skills, like these human skills that says fundamentally capacity for learning was one of those ones identified, our ability to learn, our ability to reason, our ability to communicate effectively, our ability to kind of deal with ambiguity, to work in teams. Like these are aspects that I think was the notion of even the general liberal education that was a key part of that. What it hasn't, even previous to the age of AI, hasn't been very good at is actually readying individuals with what I would call more tactical skills, the ones that often have a relatively short shelf life. Previously it may have been 7 to 10 years, but now we're talking like 2 to 5 years, and maybe even shortening from that. And I think what the challenge is like, it's really hard to actually right now in this moment trying to predict even what are those tactical skills that are needed. And it's certainly not likely that you're going to get in a traditional degree. And so we're trying to identify is like, what are those, in fact, timely relevant skills that you need? Now, my sense is that at least at a place like WGU with a master curriculum, with our ability to actually utilize technology to enable the sensing of what are those developing, tactical, like really applicable skills that are needed right now in these different jobs. Like we're closer to that than most because we don't have a faculty-led model of tenured professors who want to just kind of stay in their office and dream up their future world and advance academic research. Like that has to be more timely and relevant. Now, what I also would say we're observing is that individuals are quite savvy, meaning whether you're already working or whether you're an emerging college student, guess what they're doing? They're augmenting their learning and the acquisition of those tactical skills by what technologies are available to them. AI itself can help you actually develop fluency in these, these particular skill sets in your field of study. So if you're going into finance or health, et cetera, there's already lots of ways by which individuals are developing that. How are they also doing it? They're seeking internships and work-based learning environments and projects to do that directly with the employers. And why are they doing that? Because now they're actually attaching their skill development directly to an employer or to a field that says, I'm signaling to you that I can actually do the work that's required in that job. That's a good thing. That's why we see the emergence of work-based learning being so critical. And that moves us further and further, or closer and closer is probably a better way to describe it, to that continual learning model. That's always like the first and next is like, what do you have to acquire next, and how do you rapidly acquire that? It's more likely going to be through work and applied learning than it is going to be through academic. That's our sense of this. And so that's why we invested heavily in some things like work-based learning, because these relevant skills are going to be learned by doing the work rather than studying it.
Who else looks at these pathways of learning and earning as being a key part of what the future looks like? And what are some of the issues with that? And what employers do we see that are embracing that the most?
Michael, maybe I can jump in. I can jump in quickly and then we'll defer to you, Omar, but just wanted to double down on some of Scott's points a little bit, that I think this disconnect that we're seeing between some post-secondary graduates and entry-level jobs, I think, first of all, it's not new, right? That this is an existing disconnect that already existed that in our mind, I think AI is just exacerbating in some ways. But I think what it points to is not that these entry-level jobs aren't there, but perhaps that they're just more complex and that they require the ability to actually manage and engage with some of these systems, especially AI systems. And so I think, as Scott said, I think a core part of all future pathways has to be work-based learning. I think one of those work-based learning pathways from the DOL's perspective is apprenticeships, right? I mean, if we look at this space in the last 10, 20 years, there was certainly a lot of college for all movement that existed. And I think the administration's position has been very clearly that college for all movement has failed. And that there are a lot of individuals that were not well served by trying to put everyone down that one pathway. And so our administration right now is really doubling down on this notion of apprenticeship being a very, very high quality pathway because of its ability to really stay close to employer needs, right? Because it is on the job learning. And so that's just something that, in addition to the broader set of work-based learning that Scott spoke to, that we really support, I think apprenticeships in particular as sometimes an alternative to college is something that we're really excited about.
Yeah, I'm going to dive in on here as well, Michael, and sort of come back on some of the points that people are talking about. And I want to sort of really give us all a reality check, because even before AI, we already had a bunch of issues. Today in the US, 22% of kids are at level maths proficiency for grade level, 22% only, 35% literacy. Indeed, on early careers and early entrants, AI is already impacting AI impacted jobs by 13% reduction of early entrants. We've got 30 million adults in the US who don't have a high school diploma. And we've got about 43 million kids who go to college but don't complete at enormous cost to the colleges and to themselves. So that's like our base educational system, what we call learning to earning, isn't delivering at the level we need it to. And actually, we did this research that we published on our website, Lost in Transition, that the cost to the US economy is about $1.1 trillion a year. If we can accelerate the time it takes to get people from learning into earning by 20%, it's 139 billion positive extra income into the US economy, which is like the equivalent of like 3 million cars. It's an unbelievable.
Or Elon Musk makes in 10 years.
More than he makes in 10 years. And so AI is just, if you like, going to exacerbate this scenario, but we know what the answers are. And I think Scott and Taylor are talking about some of it, like alternative skill pathways, where we obsess a little bit less about college degrees, or at least about traditional four-year degrees, and understand more about the blue-collar workforce, physical workforce, allied health. Those are going to be big growth areas in the future, and they're not so easy to AI-ify. And so we should be doubling down on, indeed, scholarships, mentorships, apprenticeships. I think the US per capita use, per worker capita use of apprenticeships is about 10% of what you see in the UK, Germany, and Switzerland. And yet, employers all know they want to do it, but it's actually an area where I think, Taylor, looking at you, public-private partnerships can be incredibly powerful to just accelerate these things. They haven't historically been part of US government policy, but they have been in other countries. And I think with this new administration's focus on industrial policy, there's an opportunity here to do something different. And then the other part that I touched on earlier is learning to learn. When the half-life of skills is declining, the one skill you really need to have is be good at learning. Now, the learning scientists know all about the behavioral techniques and the metacognitive techniques to do that, but learning is hard. It requires effort to develop neuroplasticity to actually learn. And so the more we can learn from entertainment segments on how to gamify learning more and make it a little bit more simpatico with people's interests and motivations, the better. And I think there's a ton of ways AI can be used for that in digital platforms to help people learn. And I think that's something that we all need to push on very hard to help people learn to learn more.
Yeah, I think
Can I?
Please.
Chris.
No, please.
I'm going to stay on that, and these conversations are sometimes good if you just be I'll be a little provocative maybe and see where the panel goes on this, because I quite really like what I'm hearing out of this discussion, and I want to introduce the and concept, right? And because I think probably historically, maybe in a false sense of security, we've over relied on the three bigs: education, government, and employers, right? That if I worked with a good employer, I'd have employment for life. They teach me the skills I need, I'd be fine. If I went to a good university, I would learn something, I'd come out with that degree and I'd get a job. Government will also take care of us because we'll set the direction for the society. And I think there's a little bit what I'm picking up from this, and what I'm seeing is the individual has to have a larger say in that equation for themselves previously than before. So to be a little bit more provocative perhaps to the conversation, I think there's an and strategy where the three bigs that I spoke about today will play a complementary role, but also the role of the individual has to always be on. So this idea that we talk about in the private sector is, I'm not sure what the question is, but the answer is learning agility. And so if you start there, I think we can bring this together in a more interesting way. And so just to push this concept a little bit more, the role of the individual is going to be really, really important to go forward.
Mike, I appreciate that. Can I offer also one other thing that
go for it.
even as an employer. WGU has over 10,000 employees, and that one thing that we're also observing is that AI and in its capabilities, whether it's actually large language model capability or whether it's even predictive capability that you can utilize to facilitate new designs, new processes, practices, etc. The most savvy individuals are just actually viewing that technology as like, well, I'm just going to start exploring its use and all the different things that I do and the task activities. And by the way, the technology itself is so intuitive that it's not dissimilar from the smartphone device, right? That says like not a single individual ever picked up a manual to learn how to start utilizing the smartphone device. They're not using a manual to learn how to utilize AI to the world of work that they're already in. And what's fascinating to me is that whether you're a student in an academic environment or whether you're an employee in a work environment, the savviest individuals are just starting to go like, well, I'm just going to start exploring and see what this thing's possible of. And the pace of which they're accelerating through the use of it is quite remarkable. And where it goes from just facilitating my analytical or my research capabilities to, man, I'm starting to figure out that this actually is coding new applications for me in a really rapid way, to where I used to have to do all this manual effort to ingest all this inbound content, et cetera. But now I just create a new process by which it ingests all that and just tells me my task activities, and I do those things. It's really quite fascinating just to see individuals themselves who are utilizing their learning agility to say, well, what can I do with this technology?
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly important, powerful point. So you think about 18 years ago when this device was launched, it didn't even have an app store, right? And this app store unleashed incredible innovation and productivity that we couldn't even imagine heretofore. But I just want to lean into a couple of things, just because I think there's a commonality, and the commonality is very consistent with what I believe is the future, which is kind of these core skills that people need to build upon, because we don't know the specific, application or the things that are going to be here in the future. But these 7 C's, what I call 7 C's, I think are the fundamental pieces, which are communication, which is the number one thing that employers are looking for, critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, how you work as a team, character, civics, and cultural fluency. And those pieces, and then, Scott, you talk about competency, I think, but those are you think about based on that, and then there's this overarching piece that Omar talks about of lifelong learning. Look at the number one course on Coursera is Learn How to Learn, which is free and available to everybody. But that really is, one thing we know for sure, you're going to continually to do that. And the last thing I'll just kind of touch on is this idea of 20 years ago, this thing is college for all, which, all that's resulted in about $2 trillion of debt and a bunch of frustrated people. So now it's gone to almost the other extreme, which is college at all. You should take college at all. And for some people, the decision is not to take college and develop skills and get in the workforce, and skills that aren't going to be disrupted by AI. And some, classic, college education, and for many, it's going to be a hybrid of a lot of different things. So I want to go now because we all talk about AI and how AI is being utilized to complement its work, to learn faster. I mean, what excites me is this whole idea of learning at the speed of light, because what we know is change is happening at this exponential speed. Human capabilities have been on a linear speed, but now all of a sudden, there's an opportunity to really accelerate, see this kind of exponential curve with AI democratizing learning, increasing access, lowering the cost, and improving the quality through personalization and other ways to do it. How do we see that democratization of AI enhancing the opportunity for all and lead to human flourishing?
I might tie that to questions around just what remains important in the AI era. And we frequently engage with educators in K-12 and higher ed around the future of their roles even. And we consistently get questions, what is the future of teaching? And I think that's a prime example of a role where you see, similar to other fields where we believe that cognitive labor will always exist, it's just that it gets abstracted to a higher level. You're seeing examples of that where in education for teachers themselves, clearly AI cannot fill the role of having empathy, of being able to connect with another human. I think we always think back to how, if you ask a student or anyone, an adult, what their favorite moments in school, it probably isn't, oh, I love this specific unit, or sometimes it is, but I love this specific textbook or this specific content. It's more often than not, I love this favorite teacher, or I made certain friends. So in that sense, I think AI really does not replace that human element of a school, an education institution. And in that world, I think, as we think about where value accrues in the labor, in labor, I do think, routine work naturally gets automated by AI, but there is that human element of empathy, of connection with other humans. And I think if you bring that upstream into the workforce, similar to maybe, say, banking or sales, you might have a bunch of AI agents run the more manual tasks, but at the end of the day, an AI system is not going to really help you close a deal or help you sell. So I think for our education institutions, thinking through where that value accrues, and where in the more human parts, where are the more human parts of the skill sets.
Okay. Back to how AI can be this agent for helping, create, really democratizing, creating better access for more people to get the skills they need and quality learning at a lower price. What do we see happening with that? And do we believe that that's sort of a nice, concept, but in reality, that's not what's going to happen? How you guys?
I'll just weigh in here really quickly. There are two seminal studies I think are pretty indicative of what AI can and technology can do for us. One is from Bloom's study, Benjamin Bloom, from 40 plus years ago. It actually did highlight that when individuals can have access to mastery instruction, which is a feedback loop of instruction and corrective instruction that helps individuals develop mastery. Second was the tutoring aspect of that. When individuals have that it actually shows that individuals with that are 2 standard deviations more competent than individuals in a conventional instructional model, which is what we still have in most of K-12 and post-secondary. Just a single individual broadcast information. Most individuals are left to learn on their own, et cetera. The other one was Kettinger in 2023 et al. Out of Carnegie Mellon that actually highlighted the astonishing rate of regularity in individual learning. Is that here's what I offer those, which is basically it says those who get A's are just closer to the finish line of competency than those who get B's and those who get C's, because we all learn at actually pretty consistent rates. But what I think the challenge now is like, how do we adapt to individual, where they're starting from, their pace of learning, et cetera, to say, can we in fact democratize instruction or learning the same way the internet democratized access? Internet basically just said, well, now I can make all of that learning capturable, deliverable virtually, et cetera. But now AI can also deliver highly adaptive, personalized instruction and learning in a way that says you can, in fact, dramatically increase the accessibility of skill attainment that now makes it more equitable in terms of the number of individuals that can be propagated into the world of work. And you move away from the kind of privileged outcomes that we have of the last 50 years of higher ed into more of an egalitarian approach that says talent is truly universal. And we figured out how to leverage technology to dramatically increase access to opportunity in a way that we previously couldn't. Now, what I do suspect is that we won't keep anchoring on a single bachelor's degree. We'll actually see many, many credentials emerging that are timely and relevant to what the world of work actually requires. And we won't be projecting for 10 or 20 years forward. We'll be projecting for 3 to 5 years forward. And if that happens, I think we'll see a pretty nice emergence of many, many more individuals being able to participate or contribute to the world of work. And who knows what that will unlock. That's my more hopeful kind of view of things, is that we're not going to end up in a world of decadence and self-absorption, but rather we'll continue to believe in the kind of that human aspirational expectation that says, hey, I can be better, do better, contribute better. And those are the things that still drive us to learn and to grow and to contribute. And so that's my kind of hopeful view, that technology dramatically increases the access, quality, and outcomes even in learning.
So, Omar, you agree with that? And what do you think the future of the diploma is?
So I'm going to pick up a little bit on what Claire and Scott were talking about, Michael. So I'm going to be a bit balanced in terms of the positives, but also things like that we need to focus on solving as well. So a little bit where Claire went. Like, we've got 8 billion people on the planet at the moment and growing who need help to adapt to a world filled with AI. I don't think that the rate of diffusion of AI companions and AI models and so on is going to get to those 8 billion in an equitable and a well-distributed way, unless we work very well through the people who are already addressing the 8 billion, which is educators. You have hundreds of millions of educators around the world. We need to equip them to help people, whether it's formal education, vocational education, or workplace education, help them help people adapt to the world of AI. And so I feel very strongly about that. And I'll give you one little example. If you're a teacher running a class of 30 kids, and it's a language class, you cannot have the time in the lesson to have every kid practice speaking. And if you don't practice speaking, you're not going to learn the language. But if you give people a little AI avatar to practice with on a device, then they can all speak in the class in the time. So you can use AI to democratize and make the technology a power to advance people's learning, which should help them progress in life. So I feel very strongly about that, particularly through educators. However, that's not enough. We need to admit that many communities don't have broadband access, don't have devices, so they can't even get to the AI. So that's something that you need to deal with. And even in the places where they do, like a typical US school district, you may have up to 2,400 ed tech tools in deployment in that school district, which, imagine you're a teacher dealing with that noise and cacophony to try and figure out what to focus on. So there's work to do to simplify how we bring these amazing technologies to people, to educators, to help them help people. But essentially, I do agree with Scott that if we're wise with the pragmatics of this, we can get to better price points, more addressable, more accessible to a bigger number of people, and in a way that can profoundly move people forward and help them progress. But we need to stay pragmatic.
I want to go back to this idea of the diploma and other ways that people are able to represent the skills they have, the knowledge they have, the capabilities, what opportunities should be available for them. Do we think the diploma is as relevant in the future as it was historically? And if not, what does it get augmented by, and how do people, and how does AI help, or how does AI help that?
Michael, maybe I can't contribute to the education discussion the way that the folks on this panel can. They're far more qualified than I am. But I'll just give it again another point of view from an employer perspective. There's more to the diploma than the skills, which we're talking about predominantly in the conversation. As an employer, it's a way to differentiate and to qualify the candidate that sometimes we don't like to talk about, which is, I know if you went to, I got jobs to be done. I've got roles open. I've got lots of people applying for it. How do I know that person A is better than person B than person C? Well, one of the qualifiers is they went through the effort, the energy, the application at X standard of school, and at least were able to complete it with a high level of proficiency. That means that they're going to do some of the C's that you spoke about because they had to demonstrate them where person B and C didn't. And so for me, an interesting question is, if it's not the process of going through college, the diploma itself, which is, to me, is also very, very important, not just the skills we get. What is the qualifier, and how do we know who's skilled in the future? The same way that it's a comparative point, right? Pro sports measures against actuals. You can compare. So unfortunately, there's a comparison point here. I would love to have that conversation. For me, that's really interesting, and just see if anyone agrees or disagrees with that.
One thing I would just simply offer is more of a cultural dynamic that I think still exists, which is if you left it, if you will, to the technology to actually source, interview, assess, and hire individuals, then you might get to much more of a skills-based, competency-based kind of hiring. However, humans are still involved, and humans have biases. And guess who many of the hiring managers are? They're degree holders. And so if on the margin I have 10 individuals who actually possess the skills that are required to be, readied and effective in this role, and on the margin someone actually holds a degree, it's like, guess what? They're likely biased for the one that holds the degree. And you're maybe betting on the fact that this individual, we believe, demonstrates the capacity for adaptability and growth and learning and kind of that enduring skill set that says, I'm not hiring just for the current job, but for many years of contribution to the advancement of the organization. So there's still that dynamic that exists that says humans are still involved in this, and they may still be biasing to degree holders for some time. Does that change over time? We hope so. We certainly think that, the degree by itself, as Claire pointed, is like this started a long time ago. The widening gap between the skills needed in the job and what the degree holders were coming out with. You're like, hey, this thing's not moving and this thing's rapidly advancing. And now AI just amplified or accelerated that gap. Well, how quickly or is the hiring inside the employers going to adapt to that? I don't know.
So let's flip it to the employer side. And so, this question of man versus machine, or is it man and machine? And how do we see a division of labor starting to evolve? I mean, we touched on it, but let's fast forward this a bit. And therefore, what do we think that means as it relates to kind of the future? Are people going to be working less because they don't have to work so much? Are they going to use that time for innovation? I mean, let's play this a little bit forward. How do we see this relationship between man and machine, and how does that manifest itself in terms of what a modern organization looks like that is effective?
The way I think it plays out, Michael, is today you go and do a course, whether it's a diploma or not, and become a management accountant. Tomorrow, as a management accountant, you're going to be working alongside a bunch of digital agents that do journal entries. And so actually the skilling we need to give people is, how do you as a human interact in teams, including other humans and digital agents, to achieve a set of tasks? Exactly as Mike said earlier, like some of the drudgery stuff will be the things that the agents will be particularly good at. And so humans will shift to be more architects or orchestrators. And so like you've seen this first and foremost in the world of coding. Like coders, like the best devs in the past would be like great hands on keyboard producing code. Today, the best devs are orchestrators, architects, and they're managing teams of agents who are coding. That pattern is the pattern that we're going to see across many, many different types of white collar careers. Like I said, the blue collar physical work is a different thing for a while. And so I think we're going to have to be very good at teaching people how to do that. To the comment earlier about what's happening inside the enterprise on skills, I mean, actually, the way I think the skills thing plays out is, I mean, Scott's right. If you're a parent, you're going to obsess over your kids going to college, like in many cases. If you're a hiring employer, you're going to feel more comfortable with the concept of someone from the outside coming in with a degree. But if you've got people inside your company, we need to get much better at understanding the skills of our people. Today, employers understand the skill of a person at the moment they hire them, and 10 years in, they get more information from LinkedIn than they can from their HR systems about what skills their own people have. So I can easily see a world, and this is something that we're working on with some of our customers, is like, why not use the technology indeed to assess skills in the flow of work, build up a skills profile in the business, and use that for internal mobility in the company. And that can create a sort of a more of a skills logic, at least inside the enterprise, which presages what might happen, across companies and beyond. But I think that's going to take a little while to play out.
I think doubling down on that, I think flipping it on its head, as we talk about what are important skills and whether or not the diploma will be representative of those skills, I also think, or I would hope, there is a fundamental transformation in how we assess those skills. And at least from a technical standpoint, I really do think having multimodality, the ability to actually visually and process visual and audio input for the first time ever, unlocks a whole new level of being able to assess someone's ability to work. We had to rely on traditional assessments, quizzes, surveys, because those were our only ways to have checkpoints and understanding a human's capability. But now for the first time, you actually have these ambient systems that can, in a digital white collar work setting, that can live in the browser and watch you as you do work. So you never actually have to have this, single turn checkpoint of being assessed. It just continuously assesses you formatively as you're working. One example of that is we invested in a company called Grips that acts as this filtering layer. And they're starting with coding. And instead of, as a recruiter in an enterprise company, getting this person got 8 out of 10, what you get is a qualitative scorecard that lays out how they started coding, where they spent the majority of their time, how it aligns to the skills that you're looking for. And all of that can only exist today because you now have AI systems that can, at scale, watch people work. It can listen to people talk. So I think also just thinking through what these new modalities unlock, not only for the inputs of how we skill people, but also for what that means about how we assess people in the first place, because we have these systems that are able to assess like humans for the first time.
So talk about, I mean, what the modern organization looks like. We talk about all the different ways that we can slice and dice and create a knowledge map about where different people are at and how they're evolving and how to get them reskilled, upskilled, and so forth. And this kind of division of labor. But what is the model of the future for the successful enterprise? And what are some of the key fundamentals of it? Because one thing we know for sure, things are going to change. But what are some of the key things to be a successful organization are going to be critical to how you compete and thrive, as the world goes forward?
I mean, for me, Michael, like some tenets of core economics will always be true. Like companies who are customer focused will win. Companies who attract top talent will win. Companies who lean into modern innovation and technology will win. I mean, those things will not change. Now, the exact way in which you operate, sure, that'll evolve. And the nature of tasks and processes and so on will evolve. But I think one of the core things that we believe is companies who truly understand their career architecture, meaning job families, job categories, roles, and how roles break down into skills, and plan for skills, and understand how the evolution of skills needs to be in a world of automation and AI, those companies are going to be more successful than the companies who don't. And I mean, where Claire was going, I'd be a little bit careful with, there's a very famous large e-tailer that got into trouble for monitoring its warehouse workers too closely. So I think as employers, you want to be very sensible and transparent with your people about what you're tracking and so on. But indeed, ambient assessments that infer skills from what people actually do likely is better for most people than the people who just show up really well in an interview or whatever else and are good at boasting about themselves. And so we can move to actually a more meritocratic structure where people can demonstrate what they can do and get progressed and promoted on that basis as well. So I think those will be some of the things that great enterprises will do well in the future.
Mike, what do you think?
I think all these comments are right. They're directionally right. I just want to make sure that we're putting humanity and purpose back into the conversation. In a war for talent, in a war thinking about this discussion, it seems to always lend towards the technology side of where we're heading. And I think the humanity side has to be balanced much more in these equations than it is. And I know that it was a little bit what Claire said earlier. I know that the things that I remember and the things that I value in my life are the relationships or places where I work with purpose, where I feel value creation, where I feel common belonging. And, I think that employers that will win in the future and societies that will win will get the balance better than the discussions generally go today. That's my point of view.
And I agree. And one of the titles of this conversation is about workforce flourishing. And we talk about, how people find meaning through learning and purpose through their learning and meaning through work. How do you think, in this world of, all the technology and agentic AI and all this, I mean, how do we make sure that the purpose and the meaning of one's work is being reflected in an organization? I mean, what is being done? Because I think that is the motivator of people. Otherwise, you can sit around, drink wine, and eat grapes all day. So how do we see that? How do we see that being manifest itself with the best organizations?
Yeah, I just would offer that a couple things. One is echoing what Omar said is that listen, you have to actually track individuals who believe in the mission and purpose of the organization. You want, that's where I think most of the fit exists, is like, do you believe what we believe at this organization? It's like, because then I know that you'll intrinsically organize all of your time, energy, and effort to advancing that mission or purpose. You certainly want to be really clear about the individual, the customer that you're serving in that regard. But then there's a different perspective I simply want to offer is like, I kind of have disabused myself of this notion is like, you have to attract top talent. I think that's a myth. A lot of large numbers would say that no single organization somehow has a corner on the top talent, such that I think actually the best organizations realize that everyone actually has inherent worth and has unique talents. That what you're trying to do is actually staff a team, if you will, that says the complement of their particular skills and talents actually builds the best team, because you now have everyone actually excelling in the aptitudes that they particularly represent, rather than using more common yardstick to say, oh, these are individuals at the top talent. Such that I actually think that puts more emphasis on the organization to say, how good are you at developing talent? How good are you at actually enabling technology, innovation at speed and scale? How good are you at advancing kind of the way in which you're going to differentiate your products and services for the customers you're trying to serve? Is like, if you do that, your central purpose then is trying to figure out how to motivate and inspire the individuals to contribute in the way that they uniquely can. And you actually recognize the contribution of every one of them as top talent, such that everyone is top talent. And it's how well do you develop that, utilizing all the capabilities that are at your disposal, including and especially technology. So my sense is, you can create incredible leading organizations because you recognize what humans can uniquely contribute to it, and you invest in practices to develop all of them to advance the work that they want to already advance because they're aligned with your mission and purpose.
So other than we're wrapping up here in the next few minutes, but I'd like everybody to contribute to the next two questions. Other than your own organization, who do you see as being kind of a window to what thriving looks like, or what excellence looks like in terms of the future, either and from a business, it could be a government, and an academic institution? Who's doing smart things that you think, oh, this is impressive. This is kind of a window to what we think the future looks like in a thriving society. Claire, I'll call on you first. Just gonna get her, but everybody's got a chance to answer this.
Yeah, I definitely, I'll maybe defer on just institutions or enterprises that are.
Say one, just you can have one of the three things I just asked about.
Yeah. I think actually looking at the startup ecosystem, which we're obviously looking at on a daily basis, I think looking at what some of these earlier stage startups, these AI native companies are doing around building their orgs, because they've had this opportunity to build alongside AI agents. I think they've been very smart about really thinking through where allocation of agents are versus allocations of human work. I think they've been wise in really showing how when you hire for potential and hire for people who have this entrepreneurial nature, you can actually have essentially these teams of super lean, things like Midjourney, Cursor, these teams that have scaled to immense revenue, but also run relatively lean, because you essentially operate as if you have multiple entrepreneurs working towards the same vision and the same purpose. And so in that sense, I think it's been an interesting model to see some of these earlier stage startups build AI native, embed AI work from the start, and see how they've achieved what traditionally would have taken many, many years, with a lot less people, a lot less resources, while still being able to give the human workers at those organizations of belonging, a sense of purpose, and a shared mission.
Okay, and Scott, I'm going to go to you. I'm going to call out everybody, so everybody's getting a chance here. So again, business, government, academic institution, all three. What's sort of impressive? You see a glimmer of like, okay, these guys really are doing it smart. Besides, obviously, Western Governors is incredible.
Yeah, I can't vote for ourselves.
You can't. Very say you vote for yourself.
Across the space, I would offer this is that I do think that the skills-based future, that skills architected talent life cycle, has been facilitated by federal and state government investments. I think are really encouraging around learning and employment records. I think we're getting to the point where the volume of data and the practices around it are increasing our capacity to identify talent wherever it is, and also enabling individuals to recognize the competencies that they already possess. So whether that's federal support for it or whether it's in states like Indiana, Alabama, et cetera, to where they're really advancing that more equitable kind of skills-based architecture of talent lifecycle is very encouraging. I think in the world of work, I'm kind of where Claire is like I'm actually looking more at the startups, the likes of a Code Signal, for example, who's trying to build the bridge from the employer side to say, how do we utilize AI to really start surfacing the skills you require in these jobs? How do you develop and design assessments around, as you're surfacing or sourcing talent to, in fact, assess their readiness into those jobs? That to me is really encouraging because it's kind of building the bridge from the employer and workforce side of that. What I certainly expect is that there are AI native institutions out there in the world of learning that are going to be the WGUs of the future, in the sense that they are now, if WGU was a digitally native one, we're certainly trying to accelerate our AI native designs, but there are startups out there that are also advancing how we take the technology for what it's enabling and now rethink the entire learning and instructional experience so you can dramatically increase the skill readiness of all the individuals. And that's encouraging. So, whether that's in micro-credential or in degree programs, we do believe credentials are still a huge signal of competency into the world of work.
Omar.
So I'm not going to flatter Scott and talk about WGU, so I'll pick another institution, which is run by David Garza in Mexico. So Tec de Monterrey is a really, really great school, and it's a kind of combination of MIT with community colleges, because the underlying understanding is you can't solve just for, if you like, the elites. You have to also give back to the community and lift them up and find the synergy between the two things. And so a lot of the logic actually that Scott laid out earlier of not playing basketball where one person carries the team, but playing soccer where all 11 have to pass all the way to the front to score the goal, is going to be more and more important in our society when AI proliferates. And so I love what that group at Tec de Monterrey are doing.
Mike.
I'll be quick. Two thoughts. I'm also in the startup space. We spend a lot of time there. By the way, Scott, Code Signal is a cool company. Just you don't have to look further than what Workday did. Workday is a dominant platform in the HRIS space. In the last 2 weeks, they purchased 2 native AI companies, both in Paradox, and then last week in Sana, saying that the partnership or the ability to move faster in these startup companies are better than their ability to build it inside. I think that's an incredible example of what's gone on. And then lastly, we're doing a lot of work and spending a lot of time, and it's not great to generalize, but we're seeing more and more money move from the public sector to the private sector, and I'm seeing PE companies move much faster in the AI adoption in public companies. And it's really interesting because I think they're focused on value creation and they're focused on the fastest route home. And they're seeing, if I develop my people faster in this space, then I can create more value. And it's just, I'm seeing it more and more and more. That's it.
So Taylor, I know you can't answer to a specific company or institution or probably even country. So we'll just say United States, go USA. So my last question, really quick, because we've really run out of time. In the 1967 movie, The Graduate, the advice to Dustin Hoffman by Mr. McGuire, he said plastics. Okay, no more than a sentence. What would your recommendation be to the 2025 graduate? We'll go around the board. Go ahead.
The recommendation that I would have is entrepreneurship, given all the capabilities that AI has presented, I think is more of an opportunity than ever. And so I think there's a lot of fear out there that kids are seeing in the headlines, but I think there's a lot of room for optimism in thinking about potential for entrepreneurship and small business ownership.
100% agree with you. Claire.
Sorry, with me did. I think similarly, entrepreneurship, agency, I think those are things that, again, if you have the ability to orchestrate and drive on an individual level, those things will supercharge you. We're already seeing that with engineers and solopreneurs today. Those who have agency and creativity in the 7 C's that you mentioned are able to 10x themselves. AI is really just the multiplier here.
Scott.
Yeah, humans are the principal in this story. They're the ones that actually have the decision-making authority, and never see that to anything else. It's like, technology is an enabler of the human potential, not the other way around.
Yeah, we said software's eating the world, AI is its teeth, but humans decide what to eat. Omar.
But you know what I'm going to say. Learning to learn. Practice learning. Be good at learning.
Awesome. Michael, final words.
Yeah, I don't have anything incredibly wise to say after all that, except that I think that the answer is that no matter what you're doing, have a technology and learning mindset built into whatever you want, whatever you're passionate about. Have to have both.
So with that, thank you so much. It was an incredible session. Can't thank you enough for your time and great insights. Thank you, everybody who's tuned in and is going to watch this later. So stay tuned for the next version of GSV TV. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.